following video features 0 spoilers for the Amazing Digital Circus finale. Feel free to watch this even if you haven't seen the entire show. This is a video about something super specific to me and how I view these characters, informed by a sort of rare-ish but still recurring trope I've seen pop up in media. Something I call the facilitator archetype and the barriers it creates in me to immediately registering when a character is sinister or dangerous. Total Drama Island was an animated pastiche of survival reality shows and game shows hosted by a character named Chris McLean. Watching Total Drama as a kid, Chris registered as little more than passingly charming for a while. His nature as a self-absorbed egomaniac without a care for other people's well-being was characterization that kind of crept up on me, even though looking back it was incredibly obvious that he'd always been that way. So why was this major definitive aspect of the show's most recurring character not immediately obvious in a show that otherwise admittedly is very straightforward and obvious with its characterization? Well, it's 'cause he's the host. Chris is the facilitator, the reason that the show within a show exists in the form it does. Reality shows and game shows, even fictionalized cartoon ones, are social experiments, and the host is framed as the one running the experiment. In that way, from the perspective of the viewer watching the show, the host is somewhat obscured, exempt from real critical thought, the same way a scientist might hide off in another room while running a test on someone. They can't be part of the experiment if they're busy setting it up and observing it for results. Total Drama Island, at least as a first impression, creates a narrative where people like Owen or Heather or Gwen are subjects, and Chris is an observer. The contestants create the drama through their personalities and relationships. Chris facilitates the drama by generating obstacles for those personalities to bounce off of. Chris positions himself as a function, and because of that, we and the characters are less initially critical of him as a person. As the Total Drama series went on, Chris would become steadily more involved with the antics, and his own personality and dynamics would make him more of a subject. In turn, the rest of the cast, and hopefully the viewers, would sour on Chris and realize just how awful and manipulative he was. But I've always been quietly fascinated with that perception of him that I had on first impression. A guy who was so off to the side and above it all that he almost didn't register as a character the way his subjects did, let alone as the guy who is the whole reason for the other characters' suffering. Chris is the villain of Total Drama, but you initially hesitate to think of him that way because we're not conditioned to engage with the guy who makes the show happen the way that we engage with the people on the inside, facing the obstacles, undergoing the character arcs, and forming fun little pairings or communities. As the perpetual commentator, the perpetual outsider, our inclination is to view Chris as kind of just a guy, even when there's no hiding the fact that he is creating all of this misery. I think of some other cartoons from my childhood, even just individual episodes, or video games like Ratchet Deadlock, stories where the host or backer of some kind of game show is positioned as the antagonist, but where the antagonism is inherently offset by their nature as host. That's the thing about a host of a real reality show. The host has to be likable, but they can't be the main attraction. There has to be that precise balance there, where their personality is absorbing and their affect is uplifting and even commanding, but their actual presence is negligible. They're here to deliver the show we want, not be part of the show we want for any meaningfully long period. And inside that balance is a space ripe for something insidious, in the hands of a good writer. Flash forward a decade and a half, and I think I ended up having the same experience with Caine as I did with Chris. Once again, we have a host character, a guy who creates scenarios and facilitates the program which houses the other characters, and then places himself in a passive role relative to those characters while the quote-unquote game plays out. I did a video about Caine already, going over how self-absorbed he is, but it's funny that in that self-absorption, Caine's role as a passive host who isn't in the actual adventures works as a kind of smokescreen. An emotional smokescreen that discourages the viewer from seeing Caine either as a person with emotions worth considering, or as a threat. The digital circus is Caine's world, and by design it's goofy and silly and wacky and overwhelming. Because we're getting all this from the perspective of a newcomer with no knowledge of Caine though, a neat little sleight of hand can be pulled where it feels like Caine is the way he is because of the circus, rather than the circus being the way it is because it comes from Caine. When we, and the characters, all thought of Caine as a byproduct of the circus rather than the other way around, it was easier to dismiss concerns about him and his behavior. Caine may keep secrets, Caine may do or say things that are horribly callous, Caine may be overbearing, but none of that is a real cause for concern because, He's just a guy doing his job at the end of the day, right? Like Chris, he's positioned as a function first and a person second, and any character flaws he might have are just giving that function some flavor. Caine isn't the drama, he's just facilitating the drama. Even our first real big look at Caine's underlying psychology is obscured by Caine positioning himself as facilitator. His therapy session with Zooble, where Caine is the therapist, the observer, and Zooble is the subject. When Caine allows himself to briefly get on equal footing with Zooble to become the subject of the conversation as Zooble is, it comes as a surprise because the idea that Caine even has a real psychology that isn't fodder for jokes hasn't been established. Caine's little freakout here is inconclusive, not only because he literally doesn't finish a sentence, he undercuts the moment by flipping right back to facilitator mode in a way that makes Caine's vulnerability as well as Caine's potential threat feel like an aberration. The brief sinking feeling that Zooble and the viewer gets that Caine might be genuinely dangerous or need genuine help is undercut immediately with humor, so it feels like just another extreme of Caine's bizarre personality, rather than a cause for long-term concern. And that keeps happening. The post-credit scene of episode 6 is quietly vital to how the audience reads Caine, and I find it fascinating that it's the only post-credit scene in the series, wink wink. Caine has multiple freakouts or moments of frustration across the opening moments of episode 6, but all of them are still mitigated by a humorous tone and still mitigated by the filter of Caine's role as facilitator. Of course he's frustrated, but Caine's feelings don't register beyond some curious trepidation for many viewers because he's still occupying that position of off to the side and above it all. He is still the observer, still the party here to create and react to the drama, not be part of it. So the prospect of a full-blown Caine crash-out that might become the drama is a fleeting one. Even at the awards show, where Caine's ego gets struck by Ming winning favorite character, it's played for a joke, and Caine is still the host, still the facilitator, so the psychological implications here are not emphasized. It's only in the post-credits, where Caine is no longer performing the role of observer and host, no longer performing as the guy who's here to move all of this forward, that is when it really lands for the viewer that Caine's freakouts aren't just funny.
Let's see how many of them voted for me.
They aren't just increasingly frequent aberrations. There's something worth being really worried about here. The sinking feeling returns, stronger than ever, as anyone who's still in doubt realizes that Caine's character flaws are actual character flaws, not quirks. It's the realization that maybe Caine is the drama after all. I really hope I communicated my point well here. Like I said at the start of this whole video, it's just me speaking to a very unique emotional trope that I myself experience. I could be the only person on Earth for whom what I say here holds true, but I doubt it. Let me know in the comments if this whole emotionally obscuring a character's threat or flaws by putting them in the host position thing has ever impacted you the same way. And if you want to hear more stray thoughts like this, please remember to like and subscribe.